Hi everyone, this is Dr. Arjun, Assistant Professor, Department of Psychology, Kristu Jayanti College. Welcome to today's psychology discussion. Today we'll be discussing about quantitative research. Under that, a topic which is very essential to understand. We should know how to do this, and that helps us to have a better experience in research. So I'm talking about sampling techniques. So we have to understand what is sample, what is sampling, and different sampling techniques. So when we talk about sampling techniques, there are majorly two types of sampling techniques. One is probability sampling technique, another one is non-probability sampling technique. So we will start with probability sampling technique. So what is a probability sampling technique? When we are collecting data, sometimes it is difficult for us to collect data and get appropriate result. Now, you just imagine you want to collect data from a big population. So this population consists of 10,000 or 20,000 individuals. Now, collecting data from each and everyone, it's very difficult. So what we do, we take few sample from that. That means we are not collecting data from every member of that particular group. Instead, we select a small portion from that. Just consider this example. Now you are going to buy a chocolate and you don't know you don't have any idea about the taste of the chocolate. What can be done? Now, if you get a small piece of each chocolate to taste, and you can decide which one might be good. Same example in another context. If you want to buy a piece of cake and you don't know which one might be good, so instead of buying with a bigger price, that without understanding how it may taste, what you can do, you just take a small bit of that, taste it, understand it, then taking or buying that will be easier and it worth. Now the same idea in research. Instead of taking every member for your study, you are selecting few members you feel that would be enough to understand the structure of population. Now talking about probability sampling, you are selecting individuals with some methods. So now this method helps you to get a better analysis or understanding about your population. Now this is one of the desired sampling method, because when you are opting probability sampling method, you will be able to get accurate result than any of other methods. Now talking about different types of probability methods. So majorly there are four different types of probability sampling method. One is simple random sampling, second one is systematic random sampling, another one is stratified random sampling, and the fourth one is area or cluster sampling. Now these four different types gives us different meaning, different way of approaching and getting the data. So we'll see why and when we use each of these sampling methods. Now first we'll discuss about simple random sampling. Simple random sampling we use when we know the population size. So one criteria, we should know the population size. Now when you feel that you want to understand people from some culture and you want to know how they are behaving or certain factors which contributing to their behavior, now to understand that, it's too difficult for us to go and get data from everyone in that culture. Instead what we do, we can adopt simple random sampling. Now if you know that there are 100 people in that particular culture, what you can do, you can list out 100 people name, 100 persons name, and you can select few individuals randomly. Now you can look at this example. Now 40 students there in a group and you want to understand about the group. Instead, taking the 40 for your study, what you can do, You take 10 students through randomization. Now you can use cheat method, random number selection, any other method for selecting the number. Now when you're using simple random sampling, one advantage is you are less biased in the way you are selecting or in the process of selecting sample. Now you will be getting different types of people, and the variation helps you to get a better data. Now you look at the picture. Consider individuals marked green dress who studied in certain school, for example CBSE school. Now the red students studied in state syllabus. Now if you are just selecting few without randomization, your chance of selecting people from CBSE school or state syllabus school is high. Now if you are applying simple random sampling, your chance of getting samples from this group without biased or a different population or a different or verified population is high. That means simple random sampling helps us to get a better diverse data than any other method. Now we'll look at the second method, that is systematic random sampling. In systematic random sampling as well, we should know the population size. Now, until otherwise we don't know the size of the population, we won't be able to do simple random sampling or systematic random sampling. Now, looking at systematic random sampling, what we do, after identifying the population, we can select nth member in that group. For example, your population is 100. That means the group on you are trying to do research is 100. Now, if you only want 10 member from the group, so what you can do, you select every 10th member. That means you will be getting 10 member, and this 10 member will be representing entire population. So you'll be getting a randomized way of selecting. You'll be getting a randomized individuals, so biases are less. Now, another element, when the population is so high, for example, the population size is around 10,000, 50,000, 1 lakh or 1 crore. Now, when the population size is high, systematic random sampling and simple random sampling is not that feasible. So we may feel little difficult because taking every member's name and making a list for simple random sampling, or finding every nth person from the systematic way is difficult. Now, what we can do, we can use another method that called stratified random sampling. Now, this stratified random sampling we use when the stratas are available and the population size is higher. Now, just consider you want to collect data from a college. Now, this college consists of different programs, and a lot of students are studying there. Now, imagine in that college, 50,000 students are studying. Now, if you are going with simple random or systematic random sampling, that might be very difficult for us to use it. Why? Because population size is so high, and for randomly selecting the member, it is very difficult. We have to list out all the students, and from that list we have to select for simple random sampling method. Even if you are using systematic, we have to have the list and every nth person we have to select. So this seems not that feasible. What can be done? This is the answer. So we can use stratified method there to get data. Now, in stratified random sampling, so we have different status. Just for an example, now talking about a college, you might be having humanities, and you might be having another deanery called commerce. You might be having arts and science. So when you have different deaneries, we can divide this deanery, and under that deanery, again we can divide some more sections like departments. And under department, again we can also take a smaller group from that. So in stratified random sampling, when the population is high or the population is so large, then we can use stratified random sampling. And when we are using stratified random sampling, we will be having some groups. Now talking about the group, each of the group within the members of the group, within the group, people are homogeneous. That means when you are considering three strata, one is humanities, another one is commerce, another one is arts and science. Now, in each of these strata or group, the assumption is that people should be homogeneous in nature. All people, all population, all the members of your population under each of the group is homogeneous. Now think about some situation where you may not be getting homogeneous data. In a group, getting homogeneity may be difficult, or think about a bigger group where collecting data is little difficult. Now for that, what we can do, we can think about area or cluster sampling. What is area or cluster sampling? Now in area or cluster sampling, for example, if we are trying to understand the banking system. Now in the banking system in India, now it's too difficult for us to get data. Why? Because a lot of employees, a lot of banks are available. Now to understand or to get data from the banking employees, what can be done? Now we can divide them into different groups. When you divide, this is not the same way as we have done for the stratified random sampling. In stratified random sampling, so we grouped based on their nature. But here, we are clustering or grouping not based on the nature. For example, you can cluster based on any criteria. Now, in India, if I am clustering, it can be based on state. It can be based on district. Now, I cluster first, and among the cluster, I select few for my study. Now, for example, I have selected Maharashtra and Karnataka. Now, I have two clusters for my studies. Still, there are a lot of data available. So, in Maharashtra, there will be a lot of banks, and it's too difficult for me to collect just within that. So, what I can do, again, I can make some more cluster in Maharashtra and Karnataka as well. Now I'll be again randomly selecting few of the cluster inside that. Now when we talk about the cluster, inside the cluster, it's not homogeneous. So the major difference between cluster sampling and stratified random sampling is, in stratified random sampling, the within the groups is homogeneous, and in cluster sampling, between the groups is homogeneous. Now, using this method, we can easily select and understand the psychological variations of individuals when we have a bigger population. Now, you can also look at this example. When you have population where there are different types of people, and it's too difficult for us to stratify, what we can do, make them as small clusters. And based on that, among the cluster, we can select few. So make it smaller and smaller. That helps us to get a better sampling, and that also represent the population. Now using any of these sampling method helps us to reduce biases, and the chances of getting a normality or normally distributed data is also high. So now I'm concluding with this idea. When we are using any of random sampling methods, we should know the population size, and the method what you are adopting or what we are adopting will help us to get a proper representation of the population. Thank you.